as we don't have current hockey, which happens occasionally. 2004, 2005, we lost a whole season. Back in 2012, 2013, we lost a part of a season. We did so in 94, 95 as well. This one just kind of came out of nowhere. Those ones we all saw coming. Now, before Annie and all of that happened, we had the ultimate Akbar. See, here's an Akbar magnet right here. So I had thought I was retiring them, but I thought about it this morning, and I thought, you know what? I need to go through playoffs from every year that I've been a fan of hockey and recall some of the big upsets. And this was the first upset I witnessed. And I remember being really, really excited about it because I wasn't old enough to know that since I was going to be a Vancouver fan that I had to be disliking of the Oilers. So I didn't know better, is basically how this worked. And this was seen as a very lopsided matchup right out of the gate. These teams were seen as not ready and still great. So the Montreal Canadiens had a dynasty that ended in 1979, but there were no signs that it was over during any of the regular seasons. 1980, they had a very good record, but they lost in round 2 to the Minnesota North Stars. Almost said the name of the team that's in Minnesota now. I didn't. So they lost the Minnesota North Stars in round 2. Now, the North Stars, they were building themselves up. It looked like they were going to be a Stanley Cup champion soon, and there was a lot of talk about how great that young team was. But the Oilers were seen as being too much offense and not enough defense. They were 6th in goals for that year with 328. They were 15th in goals against with 327. There were a lot of goals scored. Montreal, on the other end, 332 goals for. That's 4th. They were 1st in goals against with 232. I don't think that cracks the top 10 now, but that was number 1. And defense really was the best offense at that stage in the National Hockey League. The team that very often would have the best defense and best goaltending in the league would end up winning Stanley Cups. And I know there's people out there right now going, hey, I'm a Blues fan. We did that this year, so it's not a used to. And yeah, no, that was technically last year, so kind of used to. Now, the Oilers, after this series, went on and played the Islanders. And they took the Islanders to 6 games. So these guys were for real. And we would see them become a champion later. But keep in mind, this is a first-round matchup between West and East. This was a Norris Division team. Everything was all backwards at this stage. Coming out of 1981, the NHL went, yeah, that's enough. And in 1982, we went to the divisional series, which everybody thought was fine until they went to 1 versus 8. And now they've gone back to divisional. So, 29, 35, and 16 was the record for the Oilers. There were no 3-point games. There was no overtime. So that's 74 points. 10th in the National Hockey League that year. Whereas Montreal, they were 45, 22, and 13. They were number 1 overall with 103 points. And again, and I've mentioned this before, back in the 80s, if your team had 100 points, that was a major accomplishment. That was huge. Now you just go, these guys got 100 points. Well, we'll see if they do anything in the playoffs. They got 110. That's impressive. 115. Okay, now you're talking. Now this, again, round 1. So you go out and you start, and it's first 2 games in Montreal. They were scheduled to have 2 in Edmonton, and then game 5 would have been in Montreal because it's a best of 5 series. So coming out into the first period of this game, it would have been understandable if the Edmonton Oilers were maybe a little bit overwhelmed. You've got a lot of Hall of Famers on this Montreal roster. Guys who had pretty good seasons. A guy named Guy Lafleur. We've all heard of him. You won't hear much of him during scoring summaries in this. And it was really kind of the start of Guy Lafleur's drop and really confirmed the rise of Wayne Gretzky. This is where Wayne Gretzky showed he could do it in the playoffs. Because that had been the question mark all season was, but what are they going to do in the playoffs? So, first period, it's Glenn Anderson scores from Gretzky at 6:41. Gretzky piled on the assists in this series. Steve Shutt then scored from Pierre Mondu at 11:15 to tie it up. So, not out of this. But 27 seconds later, so while they're still announcing the Montreal goal, Yari Curry scores from Gretzky and Brett Callaghan at 11:42. And if you're going, Callaghan? Yeah, Callaghan. The funny thing is, I had Brett Callaghan hockey cards at that point, and I thought this kid was going to be, he was going to be great. I thought Matty Hagman was going to be pretty good too. So, I knew how to pick him at a young age. I really did. You mark my words. This Matty Hagman, they won't forget him. I'm just kidding. I wasn't saying that because I was 8. Yari Curry then scores from Gretzky at 17:36. So coming out of the first period, it's shock. It is 3-1 Edmonton over a team that's supposed to be still a Stanley Cup champion. a team that is supposed to be absolutely fantastic. That this was when the New York Islanders were trying to win back-to-backs, and the only team that was seen as maybe being able to stop them was Montreal, although Philadelphia definitely had the size. Second period, there's no scoring. So this becomes a Montreal game in the second period. Like, all right, we're going to shut this down. We're going to play our defense. Third period, it didn't take long. Callaghan scores from Gretzky at 1 minute and 14 seconds. So years and years and years before a guy named Sidney Crosby was making pedestrian wingers look pretty darn good, Gretzky was doing it as well. No offense to Brett Callaghan. None. I don't think he'd take any out of that either. So the Montreal Canadiens would score on the power play. It's Doug Risebrough scoring, so that gets it a little bit closer. But that's at 7:39, and then about 6 minutes later, a little under 6 minutes later, Paul Coffey scores from LaRiviere and Curry. So again, Edmonton restores that big lead. Réjean Houle would score from LaRouche and Shutt at 16:55 and down 5-3. Montreal figures, what the heck, we're going to pull the goalie. And the Oilers say thank you. It's Callaghan into the empty net from Gretzky at 19:21. So I can be forgiven as a kid for seeing Callaghan score 2 goals and an assist in a playoff game at the start of the playoffs and say, this guy's going to be pretty good. Andy Moog, 28 saves on 31 shots. He became a major story as this series went along. Sevigny, 22 saves on 27 shots. Richard Sevigny, rough run for him. He's coming in after Ken Dryden. So just imagine trying to replace Ken Dryden. And he wasn't Ken Dryden. And in this game, Guy Lapointe got thrown out. Got 17 penalty minutes in that game. So there was some fighting going on during this game. There were a couple of fights in it. And that was how playoffs worked then. You didn't stop fighting in the playoffs. So nowadays, for the kids out there, yes, you're used to fighting stopping in the playoffs. Back then, no, it didn't. It slowed down, but it didn't stop. So we go into game 2. Montreal needs a big bounce back. And it's Edmonton that jumps out to the lead. It's Paul Coffey at 5:24, the great rover of the early 80s. So after the first period again, it's 1-0 Edmonton in Montreal. Absolute shock that down 1-0. Now they're threatening maybe being down 2. But they have a power play to start the second. Gaston Gingras scores on the power play from Pierre LaRouche and Larry Robinson at 32 seconds. That's right, Larry Robinson on this team as well. There are a lot of really good players in Montreal. You wouldn't know it by the scores. But Edmonton gets a power play. On said power play, it's Risto Siltanen scoring from Curry and Gretzky at 4:43. Montreal ties this for 3 minutes. And then Edmonton goes, nope. 4 minutes. And then Edmonton goes, nope, and takes it away from them. So we go into the third period. It's 2-1 for Edmonton until Jari Kurri scores from Callaghan and Gretzky at 14:27. So again, Callaghan now with 4 points in 3 games, more than Guy Lafleur. I have not said his name yet. Guy Lafleur didn't adjust in the 80s as well as one might have thought he would either. He wasn't a happy camper, and you could see it when Guy Lafleur wasn't happy. Andy Moog, 40 saves on 41 shots. So this is why when I see people making these ridiculous assertions, oh, goalies were just garbage in the 80s and blah, blah, blah. No, we still had goalies that had good nights. We still had goaltenders that would put up 40 saves. Yes, goaltenders on average were not as good as they are now. It's not close. The equipment wasn't as good either. That's a whole conversation for another time. But there were still goaltenders who stole series, and Andy Moog did that. Richard Sevigny saves 26 out of 29. And it's not Sevigny playing bad as much as Moog's just stealing it. Andy Moog hockey cards the following year, because he was a rookie, were a hot commodity. He was their guy, and there was this guy named Grant Fuhr coming up that we thought was going to be pretty good too. But Moog, he was the star. So we go to game 3, and they're going into Edmonton, and I remember, I still remember this from, I was 8. Yeah, I was 8 at that point. Did I say 7? I meant 8. It's 1981, Shannon. No, wait. 7, yeah, 8. All right, so math may not be my strong suit today. That's fine. So we go into this game in Edmonton, and the atmosphere is absolutely electric. I remember those 80s series in Edmonton and the crowds just being absolutely just so excited to watch these games, and just how loud it was. And it just felt different than every other arena. You could tell, like you go from one series to another, and when an Edmonton series started, you could tell. It was all the way through the 80s. And so this was a pretty strong crowd right off the hop, and it didn't take long for them to have something to cheer about. So first period is Matty Hagman from Anderson at 6:09, and Hagman's going to be something, promise. And then it's Paul Coffey from Gretzky and Curry at 15:54. So at the end of the first period, it is 2-0 for the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah, the Oilers are up 2-0. So second period, we see that the Oilers extend their lead. It's Gretzky with his first goal of the series. They're up 2 games. They're up after the first period in game 3, and Gretzky doesn't have a goal yet. He decides, I'm going to get some goals, now that he already had 8 assists in the series in 2 games in a period. Callaghan and Coffey with the assists at 8 minutes and 15 seconds. And then Montreal wakes up. It's Engblom scoring from Sevigny and Lafleur at 8 minutes and 49 seconds. Yes, Richard Sevigny scored just as many points in this series as Guy Lafleur. That's how bizarre a world this series was. Steve Shutt would then score at 15 minutes and 33 seconds, and then makes it 3-2. And it's like, all right, Montreal's in this. No, they're not. Gretzky scores at 18:56. So Gretzky's decided, all right, now's my time. Here I come. And it was insane to watch. Third period, no scoring, but down by a couple. Montreal does what you have to do. They pull the goalie. So in the last minute of the game, Dave Lumley scores from Kevin Lowe at 19:23. That makes it 5-2. They put the goalie back in. Gretzky goes, no, I'm getting a hat trick tonight. And he scores with 7 seconds left from LaRiviere and Coffey. So your final score is 6-2 for the Edmonton Oilers, and Montreal is gone. Montreal eliminated in 3. They were the number 1 team overall. So if you'd had a President's Trophy back then, they would have got swept in 3 at the start of the series, at the start of the playoffs. Sevigny, 23 saves on 28 shots. Moog saved 22 out of 24 and solidified his role as a hero. And then he added to that in the 6-game series against the Islanders. Because again, they weren't supposed to extend the Islanders to 6. The Islanders were a machine, and they did it. The Oilers, a team that went from probably not ready, probably not good enough defensively, to holy crap, these guys might be for real. That's what came out in 1981. They would have their setbacks in 82 and in 83, and then in 84 they were ready. This is why I don't count a team out when they have a bad year and people are like, that's it, they're done. No, we've seen this. So in this Akbar series, Guy Lafleur 1 assist, and he was a -3 in the series in 3 games. Steve Shutt 2 goals and an assist, 3 points. He was actually a +1. So his series wasn't bad. And having a +1, and I know people don't like plus minuses, but look at the scores. And he was a +1. That says Shutt had a pretty good series. Bob Gainey, 3 games played, -5. I'm going to go ahead and guess he was against the Gretzky line. and it was probably a rough time for him. Richard Sevigny, 0-3 with an .845 save percentage. Yeah, his time as a starter in Montreal was not really all that long. And again, trying to replace Ken Dryden, yeah, good luck with that. And of course, the Michel Larocque thing was going on then too. I talked about that in the history videos, which didn't get watched that much. There's a whole history list on this channel of like 100 years of NHL history. 1 video for each year. On the Edmonton side, Gretzky had 3 goals and 8 assists, 11 points in 3 games. He's a +11, which again, if people don't like plus minus, he's +11 in 3 games. Curry, he was 3 goals, 3 assists with a +10, and this is where the conversation starts of Curry kind of being, fed by Gretzky, and well, it's all, Coffey. Curry's pretty good, but every goal he got, Gretzky had an assist on. So is it really Curry? Is it Gretzky? It's probably more Gretzky. So for people who complain about Draisaitl, it happened with Curry 30 years ago. Andy Moog, .938 save percentage. It's still technically, until next year, I can still say 30 years ago. It'll be 40 at that point. Andy Moog, .938 save percentage. People right now are saying that's not how calendars work. I know. Andy Moog, .938 save percentage. He was 3-0 in that series. And again, when you have a goaltender who's saving roughly 100 percentage points better than the goalie at the other end of the rink, you're probably going to win the series. So Moog became a hero. The Oilers score the upset. And the world was kind of sort of stunned by what happened here. Montreal, a favorite to go to likely the final, and hey, these guys are going to get it back. They had just ended their massive dynasty in '79, and they still had a lot of those parts still left. It was the goaltending they didn't have, but they also ran up against a team that was going to have a dynasty of their own, and they served notice in this series. So there you go. I do intend to make a series out of this. The playoff series. This was a suggestion I had last summer, which was, can you review some of the great series that you've seen in your years of watching hockey? So this is the beginning of that. I do intend to talk about upset series to begin at the beginning, and then, depending on how long everything goes, we'll get into a whole bunch of other series as well. So thank you guys so much for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon.